I'm Dr. Randall Langley. Welcome to the Pinnacle Leaders Podcast, where we share life-impacting content centered on lordship, leadership, and lifestyle. Our goal is to serve leaders like you and help you maximize your potential and reach the pinnacle of your calling. Please like, subscribe, and share this channel so we can serve others too. Now, let's enjoy today's show. Jesus knew he came to the world to die. He wasn't surprised of it or afraid of it, but he also knew his death had to come at the appointed time. You know, we often picture Jesus as wandering around ministering to whoever randomly crossed his path, but that wasn't the case at all. He had to be very strategic about what he did and when he did it so he wouldn't be killed before his time. The Sermon on the Mount was one of those events that required precise timing as it launched his kingdom on earth. In this exciting episode of the Pinnacle Leaders Podcast, you're getting a sneak peek into one of our newest CLST Global courses, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' Greatest Message. In this course, you'll hear from Dr. Paul Shirek. Dr. Paul is founder of the Northern Christian Alliance, an organization working and praying together to present the message of Jesus Christ to strengthen churches and positively affect the culture of Wisconsin and North America. He and his wife, Doreen, are senior pastors at Faith Christian Church, where they have led since its founding in 1985. Dr. Paul is the author of The Last One Standing, a great read for anyone looking to be inspired and see the vision and drive he has to see God's church thrive in today's culture. We hope that you'll enjoy today's show.
How many times do we read in the Bible that Jesus did these miracles, or had this great day, or fed the multitudes, or whatever he did, and it said, okay guys, get into the boat, go to the, what? Other side. Why the other side? What's so great about the other side? I mean, I'll tell you what's great about the other side. Many of Jesus' great, profound miracle days happened in Galilee, Capernaum, right on those hillsides on the shores. Guess who ruled Galilee? Antipas. Antipas was egotistical, demanding, murderous even. Antipas would not have enjoyed Jesus' popularity growing and growing and growing, and probably Jesus realized, whoa, we had a day here today. Look at all these miracles, and we are going to be in trouble if we stay in town tonight. Get in the boat, go over to Philip's side. We're safe there. That's almost certainly much of the motivation for go to the other side. I mean, have you read about it? It's the nighttime. Go to the other side of the lake, and these guys are rowing, and there's a storm, and it's like, can't you just stay here tonight? We think it's a spiritual lesson. Certainly they learn spiritual lessons, but the idea was get away from Herod Antipas before we get in trouble. This is the beginning of something that's very important in Jesus' ministry, and it is this. Jesus knew he came to die. He knew that from the start. That wasn't surprising to him, nor was he afraid of that. But Jesus also knew there was a time appointed for that. So Jesus would have been very careful to plan that time. In my opinion, there are two really important events in the life of Jesus that needed really good timing. One of them was the Sermon on the Mount, which we'll see in a moment why. The other would have been Palm Sunday, when he said, okay, we're going to Jerusalem. When he took his sandal and put it over the side of that donkey and rode into the city, that clock was ticking. He knew he was going to die. And the timing had to be right. He also knew that there was a time to launch this kingdom by giving the Sermon on the Mount. So he had to navigate this political mess. And that's why these people became so important. So, if you read about that, you can. Herod Philip, the Tetrarch, was Antipas's brother. We mentioned him, ruled Iturea, more of a passive leader. Herod Agrippa I. He was the Herod that it's read. He gave a speech, and people said it's the voice of a God and not of a man in Acts 12, Acts 12, and he didn't give God glory. It said an angel struck him and he was killed by worms. He was also the man that put Peter in prison and was going to kill him, and the angel opened up the gate. That was Herod Agrippa I. Last Herod is Herod Agrippa II. We don't really know him as Herod. He's found in Acts 26 when Paul was a prisoner and Festus the governor said, hey, we're being visited by King Agrippa. And so King Agrippa, that's him, Herod's great-grandson, comes in and Paul preaches the gospel to him. And King Agrippa said these famous words, Paul, you've almost persuaded. Are you expecting me to become a Christian right here? And he said, King, I know you believe the prophets. I know you believe. And it was a great thing. So those were the Herods of Jesus' day. You can read about them, study them for yourself, but it unpacks the Bible a little bit when you realize what was happening. Here's a couple other players. We all know this man. Page 16, the bottom. Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was the prefect or the governor of Judea. So just like I said, Rome allowed Jews to have kings, quote unquote. They did. But they didn't trust those kings very far. They wanted somebody in Judea that was their man. He wasn't Jewish. He didn't care about the Jews. He didn't like the Jews. He was a Roman through and through. And he had the final say. He was the Roman governor. That's Pontius Pilate. So that's him. And of course, he presided at the trial of Jesus for his crucifixion. Next page, 17, Jewish political leaders. So there's more mines being placed in the ground. All these people have issues, and if you're going to live in Jesus' day and be an important figure, do miracles, teach radical teachings, get people excited about God, you've got to navigate this minefield. High priests and the Sanhedrin. There were two high priests mentioned during the time of Jesus. The high priests, if you're interested, were always Sadducees. We talked about Pharisees a little bit. The high priests were always Sadducees. Sadducee was the party that would have been considered in many ways more liberal. I don't know if that's the perfect way to say it. They weren't the ultra-Orthodox Pharisee, every little thing matters. They were less willing to believe some things. The Sadducees were the names and the power, the names and the money. They were the Rockefellers of the Israel. If you wanted to be somebody, you had to have a name and you had to come from money, and the Sadducees were that party. So they were always, the high priests were always Sadducees. Two of them during the life of Jesus, Annas and Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the ruling high priest during the time of Jesus. He presided over the sentencing or the trial, if you will, of Jesus. And interesting. Third was the Sanhedrin, or the council, referred to both in the Bible. Mostly it's called the council. You will remember reading in the Bible passages where it says things like they took counsel against Jesus. What does it mean they took counsel? It means the Sanhedrin was called and they voted to do something to Jesus. So the Sanhedrin was the supreme council and tribunal of the Jews during the post-exilic period, headed by the high priest and having religious, civil, and criminal jurisdiction. They had access to police and soldiers, which is why when they arrested Jesus, they came with spears and clubs in the Garden of Gethsemane. The Sanhedrin sent them. The council voted many times to censure, that means make them shut up, trap, and finally kill Jesus more than once. Okay? The political environment of Judea and Jerusalem was tense and fragile. Tense and fragile. Jesus kept a low profile in Jerusalem. You remember there were times where he said, I can't go to Jerusalem right now. Not the time for me. It was tense and fragile. Jesus did two notable, phenomenal miracles in that city. One was the healing of the crippled man at the pool of Bethesda in John 5. The other was the healing of the man born blind in John chapter 9. Both of those miracles had a profound effect upon the people of Jerusalem and all had other issues as well. Let's turn the page. What about Galilee? That's where Jesus spent most of his time. Jerusalem would have been difficult to be in. The religious leaders were also egotistical and jealous and were intolerant of anyone that might have a candle shining brighter than theirs. And Jesus knew that, and that wouldn't have went well. He lived in Galilee. He lived in Capernaum. There are two people in the Bible that have unique and wonderful miracle stories that were political, if you were, figures in Galilee. First one, the ruler of the synagogue. The ruler of the synagogue. Now, Capernaum is not a big place, so it's not like you're the king of the world if you're the ruler of a synagogue, but you do speak for the Jewish people in that area. Who was the ruler of the synagogue in Capernaum? A man by the name of Jairus. Anyone remember the story of Jairus? Jairus had a daughter who got gravely sick. They came to get Jesus. Shortly after he came down from a mountain and he had done all of his things, they came to get Jesus, and he said, the synagogue's daughter is going to die. She's very sick. He said, I will come and heal him. On the way to heal the synagogue's ruler's daughter, the woman with the issue of blood comes and touches the hem of his garment. Remember, if I can just touch his garment, I will be whole. She's whole. That stops the parade to the synagogue ruler's home, and she's excited, and she's testifying, and the whole thing stops, and then messengers come from the home and say, don't trouble the master anymore, the daughter has died. You don't need to come. And he said, I will come. She's not dead, she's asleep. And they came, and he went in there. And they're mourning, and he put them all out and said, she's not dead, she's sleeping. And they scorned him and laughed him. And he took with them Peter, James, and John, you remember, went into the girl's room by herself as she's laying there dead, and takes her hand and said, little girl, arise, talitha koum. And he raises her from the dead. Guess who Jesus' biggest fan in Capernaum would be? Yeah. If it were your daughter, and she was dying, and there was no cure, and she did die, and Jesus comes in and takes her by the hand, little girl, arise, and then brings her out and says, Mom and Dad, here's your girl. Big fan. Second story is the Roman centurion. That was just before him, in that parade to his house. He comes and said, Master, I have a servant who's at home. He's sick. They're sick to the point of death. I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof. Now, that really wasn't a statement of that he was a spiritual sinner. He knew he was a Gentile, and Jesus wasn't allowed to enter Gentiles' homes. He was a Jew. He said, you don't need to enter my home. You speak the word, my servant will be healed. Remember the story, Matthew 8. Jesus marvels and said, I haven't found such great faith in all of Israel. Be it to you as you have believed. And when they went home, the servant's well. Guess who's Jesus' second biggest fan in Capernaum? He's got the synagogue ruler, and he's got a Roman centurion, right? I'm sure there are a lot of fans of Jesus. I'm building that up so that we can see that these two people who are very important figures in this little town are Jesus fans for good reason. Not because they like his teaching, but he saved someone they love. So, let's walk this out a little bit. If the Roman government, Herod, Pilate, somebody involved with the Romans from Jerusalem says, hey, we've heard about this Jesus character. What's going on over there in Capernaum? If the Romans are going to ask a question about what's going on in Capernaum, who do you think they're going to ask? Their centurion. He's the leader of the army there. It'd be like going to ask the colonel. We got Colonel so-and-so in charge of our soldiers in Capernaum. Hey, what are you hearing about this Jesus? What do you think that centurion's going to say? Oh, he's trouble. You better get rid. No, of course not. He's going to say whatever it needs to be to get those Romans away from Jesus. Right? I mean, I'm applying a little logic, but it makes sense. If the Jewish Sanhedrin in Jerusalem says, hey, who is this person that thinks he's a prophet? We're hearing all kinds of things about what's going on in Galilee. Where does he live? Well, he's in Capernaum. Who are the Jews going to talk to in Capernaum to ask about Jesus? The synagogue ruler. Hey, we're hearing about things going on in Galilee, down in Capernaum. You're the synagogue ruler there. What's going on? Who is this Jesus guy? What do you think he's going to say? Don't worry about him. Jesus is not trouble. Why am I saying that? Even in his miracles, Jesus was strategic. Even in his miracles. Why? Because those two likely bought Jesus time to finish his ministry before the Jerusalem people would have him killed. Capernaum for Jesus was a pocket of relative safety. He could get away from Antipas by going across the sea. He had a slight barrier of protection with the Roman centurion, with the ruler of the synagogue, both of whom experienced miracles of healing at his hand. And he could operate there and do miracles and do his teaching. When he was in Jerusalem, he had to be very careful. In Capernaum, relative safety. And he had the Via Maris and the publicity taking his word to the whole world. So we think of Jesus as just wandering around Galilee in his sandals, talking about farming and fish stories and all of that, but it was nothing like that. It was very strategic. He knew he had a ministry to start, and he knew he had a death to accomplish, and this was all part of that plan.
Well, thanks for listening today. If you'd like to dig deeper into Jesus' greatest message, be sure to check out this brand new course from Christian Life School of Theology Global coming in April 2023. Just follow the link in the show notes to view a brief video clip of the course content. And don't forget, we have nearly 300 other online courses to choose from, and our degree and certificate programs can be customized to meet your specific needs. Thanks for joining us today. Grace and peace, my friends. Thanks for listening to the Pinnacle Leaders Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to this show on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. If you have suggestions for our show, we'd love to know what you think. Visit www.randalllangley.com for previous podcast episodes and other leadership resources. And also, you can connect with me through social media. We exist to serve leaders like you. Grace and peace, my friends.